welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. I am your host, Kris, and I'm back this week to do an interview, going solo as it were. We've had plenty of information from Tom on the Spanish League and indeed the Austrian League, so I thought it was now time to turn things to a French side of things. I've been lucky enough to get Rich Allen, who is part of the French Football Weekly crew. Good afternoon to you, Rich.
Hi there, Kris. Hope all's well.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. All finished with the Christmas period now. Back into the regular rigours of life. We've got lots to talk about, but before we sort of wade into all things French football, I just want you to have an opportunity just to tell us a little bit about French Football Weekly, how you got involved, and a little bit about the fine work that they do.
Of course. Well, the website and associated Twitter accounts have been going for quite a number of years now. I've been part of the team for just over 2.5 years. Initially, I was brought in to sort of cover live tweeting of games, updates on goals, etc. That's now sort of morphed into writing articles, contributing to the annual publication that we do on the best sort of 50 young players in France, and as of this season, becoming a sort of core member of the podcast team as well.
Right, that's a super job. I appreciate you coming on. As I said, I do want to just ask you a little bit more about the website itself. With regards to the sort of coverage you get, you're one of the finest, in my humble opinion, of sort of English covering French football sites. Do you get a lot of listenership with regards to the podcast and interaction with people through the website?
We do get a lot. Website interaction, I think what you find with website interaction nowadays, it is the rise of your social media side of things. That's where you get your interaction. So through the Twitter account, through the Facebook page, that's where we have the sort of comments, contributions coming in from. But of course, all that's then directed into or as a result of the website. So it's all good. The Twitter accounts have grown substantially over the last couple of seasons. I think as interest really itself has grown in French football.
Absolutely, and it's almost like you set that up because it's a beautiful segue. Because I wanted to ask you what made you fall in love with French football and indeed Ligue 1. I can detect from your accent that you may not be from France. So what sort of gets an Englishman into French football?
For me, I think as with a lot of people, when you talk to them, those who have an interest in French football, it was 1998 in the World Cup. For me, that was the sort of big turning point. I was sort of early teens, watching football, really starting to absorb football, and the World Cup in France '98, it really opened my eyes, I think, to sort of the wider world of football. It was the first global tournament that I can remember from day one all the way through to the final vividly. I can remember every match, remember every goal. Fantastic tournament. And really, yeah, it was that tournament and how France played and how they set up and the sort of passion that came from both the team and then from the crowd as well that really sort of just alerted me that there was a wider world of football outside of England. That side, throughout all my sort of years of following football, I've been a big fan of not the sort of fancy attacking flair, but really the sort of gritty, strong defensive units. And I think that 98 French side had probably one of, if not the best defensive units around. And really from the love of how they performed in that tournament, that then brought me into sort of following these players that were playing in the tournament. Where did they come from? How did they develop? And really then sort of discovering the French domestic game from there.
I'm gonna share a memory actually with you because that's quite eerily parallel with myself. I was can't remember how old I was back then. 1998. I was born in '83, so let the listeners do the maths. But I was a youngster, put it that way. And I remember being a fan of the French side and being an Arsenal fan. There was quite a good tie in there with the players. And I asked my granddad to go to the library because it was in the days before the internet was regularly available for youngsters, so that he could print out out the words to the Marseillaise for me. And I got an awful amount of stick from my friends because they were like, "Why are you not supporting England?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I want to support the French team. I love watching them." And I got so much stick, so much stick. But
Well, yeah, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. It's sort of as tournaments went on from '98, my sort of desire to follow England sort of melted away, if you like, and
same,
I
yeah.
sort of, the sort of frustrations of, I suppose you could argue it's a similar situation with France. Since then, they've sort of flattered to deceive slightly, but the sort of, sort of every 2 years, really, the sort of hope and expectation that seems to come around with the England side, it just got a little bit boring for me, and sort of, I don't like the expectation that I'm supposed to just support these players who are clearly not putting in their all on the big stage. And really, it was just a case of tournament after tournament, I grew more distant from England, and sort of the French team drew me in, and then obviously the love of the domestic game blossomed from there. So '98 was really the sort of the big turning point for me.
Yeah, here. And Christ, what a side that was! Just remembering
Well,
some of
yeah.
those names. Wow, amazing. Let's hope for more in the Euros this summer. Now moving on to sort of your personal sort of domestic passion with regards to French football. I believe I'm right in saying you're a Rennes fan. What was it that sort of drew you to Rennes, and what's kind of talk a bit about that club as a past and present, just to sort of put the listeners in context to how they are and what sort of a club they are.
So first of all, there are not many English Rennes fans. It's quite an unusual team to pick. But for me, it sort of stemmed from, initially it really stemmed from holidays. From about sort of 2000, 2001, I started going on holiday every year to Brittany. And really, you sort of, once you're there for, I was sort of there for a week, 10 days at a time, you start to sort of become, even after only a few days, you become sort of slightly immersed in the culture and everything that's out there. And sort of being back in 2000, a young kid who was sort of interested in football, you start to pick up, who are the big teams around there. You're looking out for scores. And initially, then it was just Rennes are the big team in the area. There was no denying that, and really it was just a case of just picking out their scores when I was out there, and then when I was back, just keeping an eye on the team. Just sort of, you couldn't really call it supporting. It was just sort of following them with a bit of a keen eye. But as the years have gone on, and you start to uncover a little bit more, and sort of, I mature as a football fan, and you can absorb a bit more and understand a bit more about the team, the history. It has become this support, and they are now my team, and it's just weird. Back when I was a kid, I was a Blackpool fan, and I always will support Blackpool. They will always be there. But now, if somebody asks me what football team you support, I support Rennes. And I'm like, well, why is that? Well, it's like, well, exactly this conversation I'm having. It's to get over. It's just, there's something about the sort of lure of French football. It's different whilst also being the same. You sort of get that feeling that it's difficult to describe, because you've got your sort of Spanish football, you've got your Italian football, where there are these deep roots of tradition and history, and French football arguably doesn't quite have that same sort of historical dominance. There were patches. We had sort of Saint Etienne in the 80s. We have 70s. We have Marseille, late 80s, early 90s. We then sort of to a slightly lesser degree had Lyon, and now we've got PSG. But for me, Rennes were just a team that, well, you ask any of the guys at French Football Weekly, and they'll say I am a typical Rennes fan, in so much as I'm frustrated, I'm pessimistic, all these negative attributes that the club seems to sort of just adhere to. Really, they do flatter to deceive. They aren't hitting the heights that they should be doing. But that frustration just draws me in more. It's like, well, I want to be there when the good times do actually properly come, because I've been with them through thick and thin. But in terms of a club itself, everything is there from years gone by to the current day for a successful club. The academy is probably one of the best academies in France. I mean, France is well regarded for producing young players. And you've got the likes of Lyon, you've got the likes of Nice, who have got top class academies. Rennes is up there. 3 names straight off the bat. You've got Sylvain Viltour, Michael Silvestre, Johan Gourcuff. 3 players straight away who all came through the youth system at Rennes. And really, it's that, I think, that there are very few, seemingly anyway, there are very few teams around France. And then when you look outside of France, there are so many players who started their careers at Rennes in the academies there. It just produces a constant stream of excellent players. And where we are then in the present day with the club, some great players. I look at the likes of Benoit Costil in goal. He's now 3rd choice goalkeeper for France. There's Paul George and Tep, really exciting winger who's also just been called up to France. You've got Abdoulaye Doucouré, a really exciting midfielder who's been linked to all sorts of clubs in England. Like Chelsea and Watford were the latest 2. And then the latest sort of young kid off the conveyor belt of the academy is a really exciting winger called Ousmane Dembele, who I think Manchester City have been keeping an eye on him. Manchester United have been keeping an eye on him. He's attracting some really big names. So really there is just a lot of, it's the sort of hope of potential that I think keeps me with the club, because they've achieved very little. Yeah. You look at their silverware and they've achieved next to nothing. It's a well regarded fact that they get to finals or they get to semi-finals and blow it against the most minor of opposition. But it is the disappointment that keeps me going. Perhaps I'm just a bit of a sadist maybe, but it keeps me going. Yeah, there are many more successful sides in the division that many people are drawn to for whatever reason. But for me, as with my support for Blackpool in this country, I don't go for the sort of the glory team, if you will. I like the fact that I'm not going to call Rennes an underdog. They are just somebody who are dramatically underachieving, but maybe it's that. I can't quite pin it on what keeps me being a Rennes fan, because week in, week out, they seem to frustrate me more than excite me. But I think it's those moments that when they do excite me, it's like, this is amazing, this is fantastic, which I suppose it's the crux of supporting any team.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course, I mean, I'm sure, like Andrew supporting Lille, I'm sure you know that things could always be worse. He won't thank me for saying that, of course, but and being a Lorient follower from the UK, I can totally understand what you're saying there. It's very much kind of a niche team. You can call Rennes a hipster team. That's fine by us. We'll quite happily take that. But I know what you mean. It's nice to support a team that is not necessarily guaranteed to succeed, but sometimes you just think, just maybe they might do something this year. So
it is, and it's also just that feeling of slight uniqueness. I think throughout my sort of travails through social media, I've come across 3, maybe 4 Rennes fans based in this country. It's 10, 20, 30 times more I've met in terms of PSG fans or Marseille fans or Lyon fans or Monaco fans. It's just quite nice to support a team as well that you can educate, I think, more people about and sort of introduce them. Well, here's a slightly more different take, if you like, on French football. You've got the sort of the glamour sides that will draw you in for this reason. Well, here's the reason that I was drawn in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. Couldn't agree more. I want to sort of move things on with regards to the sort of French football as a whole. There is a cliche, and I know my colleague John, who's our Serie A follower, he gets the same thing levelled at him. There's this kind of this stigma attached to French football. Oh, it's boring. It's defensive. People don't. It's not really a very good spectacle. And if there's a game on TV, you'd rather watch something else. What do you say to people that say that? Because I personally don't see that, but I suppose maybe we're a bit biased. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not going to lie. There are some. I've seen plenty of games where I think I have just wasted 90 minutes of my life. But I
Ditto.
think you'll find that in any division. I've seen Premiership games where I think, what on earth just happened for 90 minutes? I've seen, Bundesliga games that do exactly the same. It happens everywhere. There's no getting away that French football is defensively minded. There has and perhaps always will be a mindset ingrained almost from footballing birth of you go out and you're going out not to lose, not you're going out to win. You're going out, you're set up not to lose the game. That's just the way it is. But I think what I say to people who say that's boring, that's dull, it's not something I want to see, is give it a try. I think a lot of those people who say it's dull, it's boring, actually haven't watched a lot of French football. I think if you give it a try, you pick, just pick it. If you're not a fan, pick a team. Pick any team. 20 great teams in the top flight. Pick one of those teams and just stick with them and just watch as much as you can, really. And I think what you do is you start to appreciate that actually defensive football, as certainly was the case, I think probably in the sort of 90s, I think with Serie A, defensive football can actually be an incredibly attractive form of football to watch. And I think that's the case with France. But I think what you will do and what you'll find is you'll actually be pleasantly surprised with French football that, yes, it has this defensive sort of label to it. But actually, if you see teams like Caen this season, like Nice this season, just to name two, you've got some absolutely fantastic attacking sides there. I think probably if you look at Nice, I think if you're looking up to probably about a month ago, they were probably playing some of the most attractive football in all of Europe. They had Hatem Ben Arfa, who was just doing things that very few players in Europe were doing at that time. He's perhaps just come off the boil slightly in the last few weeks, but there was nothing defensive about Nice. There's nothing defensive about Caen. There's a lot of teams. You look at last season under Bielsa, there was absolutely nothing defensively minded about Marseille. In fact, they were hopeless in defence. Their success was built on the fact that they were such a great attacking team. And actually, I think watch some French football. I think if you just go by, I've not seen French football, but everyone else says it's dull and boring, I'm not going to watch it, then no one's going to win there. But if you actually watch it, I think people would find themselves to be quite surprised.
Yeah, here, couldn't agree more. And I have to say, watching, like you say, Nice has been fantastic this season. Just watching some of their games, and I've really enjoyed. Even I mean, the story of Gazalek, we'll probably touch on in a minute, is incredible. And people sort of go on about the fashionable teams in Europe, and they talk about like the story of Leicester in the Premier League. What Gazalek have done on the budget they've done thus far is for me easily as much as an achievement as a team at the top. So I think there's plenty of teams, like you say, you can just pick one out of a hat and go, right, that's my team, and I'll follow them. So
Well, exactly, and I think that should be widely encouraged. I think you look at Ligue 1 this season, and yes, okay, you've got PSG walking away with it as they should be. You've got Twat at the bottom who are, sadly for them, hopeless. There's no other way of getting around it. They're sort of cut adrift. They will go down. I don't see them making a recovery. But second place to 19th place is so tightly packed. And there's so many great stories in that division this season. Not only the successful sides, but then also the sides that are really struggling. You've got your Lyon, your Marseille, your Bordeaux, perhaps to an extent Lille, who are really, really struggling. And it's just interesting to see how and why after certainly Lyon and Marseille successful seasons last season, how and why things have gone wrong this season. And then obviously allied to that, then you've got your success stories. So you've got your likes of Gazalette, you've got your likes of Caen, you've got your likes of Angers. I mean, we're halfway through the season and Angers are third in the division, and they came up last season. It's just, I think if you can sort of isolate PSG as this completely separate entity from Ligue 1, it's a really exciting division this season.
Absolutely, well said. It's almost like you're a pro, Rich, because that's another perfect segue. Because I want to, I want to talk PSG. Now, obviously, people fall on two sides of the fence. You know, some people say that they ruin the division, that the money is ruining football, etc., etc. Other people say, well, you know, they've had the benefit of the riches. They're just taking advantage of what's there. Now, the one thing that I've noticed this season is that they're actually playing football this year. You know, they've been good to watch. They've actually gone to entertaining games and have been quite fun to watch, particularly since Angel Di Maria's come into the side. But what do you sort of make of their transition, and do you think that they're the real deal now, particularly as they head into this Champions League game with Chelsea? I mean, I had a cheeky fiver on them at 20-1 for the Champions League, and whilst it's probably an outside bet, do you think that they've progressed as a side this season?
Well, if I look upon what they're like in Liga, first of all, um, I completely accept that they are financially so dominant in that division. But what's perhaps frustrated me with them in the past is just that flattering to deceive, is that they could be doing so much better. Yes, they're winning games. Yes, they're winning titles. They're winning cups domestically. But I'm expecting more from them. I don't want to see them beating Gazalek at home 2-0. You know, they should be beating Gazalek 4-5-0. I think it's only in recent weeks, I think, have we seen that just start to click over, and they're now starting to convincingly beat teams. So I think it was just that it was a level of arrogance, but I think it was a level of arrogance that almost bordered on disinterest at times that really frustrated me with PSG, that they weren't taking the division seriously. And that, I think, was their downfall then in Europe. You're not taking your division seriously means you're not 100% all the time, or close to 100% all the time. So, you know, some of the games that they were playing in the division in Ligue 1, they were probably at 50%, perhaps even less than that. But of course, what that then means is that when you come to your big games, you've got to go from a 50% performance to a 100% performance. Well, that's very, very difficult to achieve, especially if it's, you know, most of the squad that have got to do that. So I think the fact that they have now started, it's probably about 6 weeks or so ago, they have started now to put in these dominant performances where actually, you know what, they have been, and I will give them credit, they have been good to watch. Ibrahimovic has been back on form. I think for the last season and a half, he's been coasting incredibly, just, you know, by reputation, really, and just tucking away penalties here and there and a couple of 6-yard goals here and there. But this season, he seems back on form. He seems to be that fantastic player that we know he is, scoring tons of goals, assisting lots of goals, creating these moments of magic. Di Maria has been a great purchase. I still don't think he was the player they needed, and I stand by that, but there's no denying he's been a great addition to the side, contributed to a lot of goals, scored some crucial goals. And I think throughout the side, there are signs that they are starting to take things a bit more seriously. So I think that how that then transitions into Europe means that they can go in approaching the game with Chelsea at a much higher level after league games. So I do expect them to beat Chelsea over the two legs, which takes them to the quarterfinals. What they then have to hope and try and do is get over that sort of voodoo, that jinx that they seem to have put upon themselves, I think, over the last few seasons at quarterfinal stage. Because there's no reason why they shouldn't be aiming for the semi-finals. And I think that's what the Qataris in charge have been telling Blanc is semi-final is minimum, really. The amount of money that's gone into this side, semi-final is minimum. What they then have to do is have a little bit of the luck of the draw in the quarterfinals, because I've lost track of the amount of times they've had to play Barcelona. They have to have that little bit of luck of the draw. But they also then have to just be right mentally. And I think by increasing their performance levels in the league, that's a major part of getting that mentality right. So, I mean, as I say, I see them getting to the quarterfinals. And I think if they can just get a little bit of luck of the draw, then certainly semi-finals are achievable. But I'm just going to be very, very intrigued to see if in the quarterfinals they do draw, you know, someone like your Barcelona, someone like your Bayern Munich. just to see how far they have actually come, because that's going to be the real test. Is when they come up against that big team in the knockout round.
Yeah, absolutely. As an Arsenal fan, I hope they don't come up against Barcelona, but I have a horrible feeling they probably will. Just a very quick thing. I just want to crowbar in here because I'm intrigued by your thoughts. Two players for PSG. We're frantically approaching that wonderful time of year where everybody gets linked with everybody else. There were some interesting comments that came out from the president of PSG recently, and indeed a certain player by the name of Adrien Rabiot. Now I'm criticised. I say criticised. A lot of my fellow podcasters give me stick because I'm always on this kid's back, and I say I think he's got a lot of talent, but I'm just not convinced by the attitude. And there's a lot of stories about his mother being involved and yada yada yada. I just want to get your sort of views on him as a player and whether he would potentially whether he would succeed if he left PSG. And I also want to get your thoughts on whether you touched on Di Maria not being the player PSG need. Do you think Cristiano Ronaldo is a player that they're not going to need but will end up with at the end of the season as well?
Okay, well, Rabiot first then. I was a skeptic. There was a lot of people praising him. I remember seeing him a couple of seasons ago when he went on loan to Toulouse as a 17-year-old. And actually, I was really impressed with him at Toulouse. He had a great season with them, came back to PSG. I expected him to then go out on loan again, but he didn't. He stayed he played a handful of games. And I think that's where things start to change. His mother is involved in him. She's his agent. She is very, very vocal in what she thinks is right for her son. And yeah, his attitude, I think probably what's helped him this season, perversely for PSG fans, was the injury to Marco Verratti. So Verratti was out for a number of weeks, and for a large number of those games, Rabiot was brought in as a replacement. Now, there were times where the PSG fans, who are notoriously fickle at times, especially those at the Parc des Princes, get on his back. They have quite long memories for some things, and they remember comments that he said and comments his mother has said, and they did get on his back. But if you actually focused on his performance on the pitch, he was actually quite impressive, I think, actually, and to almost to the extent that they didn't really, in that period, miss Verratti, which says something because Verratti is a superb player. So I think focus on his actual footballing ability. He's fantastic in the right mindset. So I think he needs that club to sort of comfort him, arm round his shoulder kind of thing. Yeah, Adrian, you're a key member of the side, etc., etc. So I think if a club can offer him that, I think he will look to move. And certainly the comments that we've had recently seem to indicate that a loan move could be on the cards in January. I think it probably could be a good thing for him. I do think PSG want to retain him. I think through all the sort of farce at times of what his mum says, what he sometimes says as a result, I think through all that they can see that actually they have a really, really good player. So I remain a little doubtful that PSG want to completely get rid of him on a permanent basis. I think certainly they've seen what's happened to a player like Kingsley Coman since he left. Has gone on and joined Juventus, and people were like, "What's he joined permanently for?" And now he's gone on and he's performing fantastically for Bayern. So I think they've just been a little bit wary there of, let's not be too hasty. Let's see if we can really try and sort of work on him, hammer home the sort of positivity that he needs. But certainly, if a team has the opportunity to sign him on loan, I'd be taking it, be whatever side at whatever level, because I do think as a player he has improved dramatically. As I say, at the start of the season I wasn't a fan. I think he was sort of living off reputation a little bit. But I think ever since that Verratti injury, where he's given a bit more responsibility, he's come on leaps and bounds. So I know he's been linked with a few sides, certainly in the Premiership. As I say, I think that's probably going to be more on a loan basis. But as a player, if you can sort of comfort him, keep him in a positive frame of mind, he's a really, really good player. Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, he is one of those signings that you could see, the sort of big name signing you could see PSG making. There's question marks over whether Ibrahimovic will be at the club come the start of next season. I'm in two minds as to whether he will be or not. If he's not, they really do need a big name attacking signing. If the reports of Ronaldo not being totally happy in Madrid are true, PSG have got the money. They could put up the money easily. I don't know. I think there are probably, for the money that they would have to pay for Ronaldo, you think, well, they could probably get, 5, 6, 7 really top class players for that same price. But of course, I said exactly the same thing about Di Maria. I look at the money they spent on Di Maria. They could have brought a handful of the top class young players in France, and then a few other slightly more experienced internationals for the same price, but they didn't. They went out and got Di Maria. At the minute, it seems to be working out. I'd be a bit hesitant. I think if Ronaldo were to go to PSG, it certainly wouldn't be a Laurent Blanc signing. And with him rumored to be signing a contract extension, I don't know whether I don't see it as a move that would happen, if I'm perfectly honest.
Interesting, because I know there's a lot of split right down the middle, and of course you got the dilemma of what Zlatan might do next as well, and as always with Zlatan, it will probably be what Zlatan wants to do rather than what any
well, of
team
course,
wants to do.
Of course, and we wouldn't expect anything less.
No, absolutely. Moving on from PSG, then I want to just touch on two names that you've mentioned previously, two fairly sizable heavyweights, particularly in Marseille's case, Marseille and Lyon. I just want to know what your thoughts are on their struggles this season. Do you expect them to recover some sort of form and finish higher up in the table? And what has gone wrong with both these sides, other than the obvious?
Well, Marseille, the obvious, of course, was Bielsa going after one game caused huge amounts of sort of struggle in the team. It was big surprise. It caused all sorts of problems for the squad, both players on the pitch and also behind the scenes. But of course, I think probably the big thing for Marseille was that 11 that was really the first choice 11 last season was completely gutted over the summer. You had Gignac going, you had Andre Ayew going, you had Mbula going, you had Payet going. 4 massive, massive players who contributed so much to the success of the team last season gone, and they've just not been replaced. It's a very small squad, it's quite a young squad. Not a lot of experience in that 11. There's been some questionable signings. They brought in Lucas Ocampos from Monaco on a permanent deal. I'm not a big fan of his. I think the money could have been better used elsewhere. They rather successfully managed to offload Florian Thauvin, which was a great piece of business, and brought in Remy Cabella, who has taken time, but we're starting to see some return to form for him. The key thing for Marseille, I think, is what happens in the January transfer window, both in terms of arrivals and departures. So the sort of 2 players that are currently linked with departures. They've got Steve Mondonda, the goalkeeper. I believe he's out of contract in the summer and was widely expected to be leaving then. Has now been rumoured that he could be leaving in January. That would leave a big hole for them. And then at the other end of the pitch, there's rumours of Michy Batshuayi leaving as well, who's effectively their only goal threat. He's their only out and out striker, really. So if one or both of those go, that's a massive, massive blow. They need to bring players in January. They need to add some experience. They've got some fantastic young players in that side, but they need to bulk out that squad with some experience. If they can do that, and perhaps more importantly, I think if they can get over this jinx they have of home form, I think it's early September since they last won a league game at home, in front of at times a pretty vociferous crowd at the Velodrome. they can get over that, get some experienced players in, then you could be looking at a top six. Certainly in the last few weeks, their form has been steadying, and I think a positive January transfer window can kick them on, and they could make a top six finish. At the end of the day, they're really not that far behind points wise, so it's certainly doable. For Lyon, it was slightly different, really. There's not been that much of a change squad wise from last season where they were so successful. They really, there's not been a great deal gone. It's hard to really put a finger on what's gone wrong. I think if I was to try and sort of narrow it down to a couple of things, they had the lengthy injury to Nabil Fekir towards the start of the season. That was a massive blow. Sort of the star young player that had come through the academy had a fantastic season last season. Just scored a hat-trick against Caen earlier in the season. Was then injured on international duty, and he's out. He's probably due back in about March time, I think. That was a massive blow because his link up with Lacazette was absolutely fantastic last season. With him out injured, that's had a knock-on effect to Lacazette, who has just been an absolute shadow of his former self. I think there's also then a case of last season, a lot of these young players that were in the Lyon side who just came out of nowhere last season, performed fantastically. It's a bit of second season syndrome, I think. They've all been given pay rises, and you just wonder what effect does that have on really young minds? Are they getting distracted? I think that has a part to play with it. And then, of course, there's the coach, who Hubert Fournier, who was actually sort of a couple of weeks ago been replaced. He was given the boot, and an internal appointment was brought in. There was a real feeling that Fournier had lost the dressing room, cliche as it is. And with the dressing room gone, you're not going to get the best out of the players. I personally believe the players should have bear the responsibility for that. It really did seem at times that they were just not bothered this season so far. And really they were, I think we discussed it actually on the last French Weekly podcast, they really were playing almost to get Fournier out of a job. Well, they succeeded with that. So with the new coach brought in, they moved to their new stadium in January. Will that have this positive impact? So I don't expect there to be a lot of changes in January transfer window in terms of comings and goings for the club there, because they do have a good squad of players. It's now a case of let a lot of players come back from injury and just see, is the attitude of the players going to be different now? They seem to have achieved their goal of a change of manager. So I think it's going to be tough for both of the sides, but certainly I think perhaps Lyon seem a little bit more better suited to returning to somewhere close to last season's form. So we'll see. On paper, there should be nothing stopping them. They have the squads, they have the players, they have the infrastructure. They're not actually that far behind points-wise. It's just, again, as with so many times with French football and French football players, it's just an attitude adjustment, it seems. So we shall see. I expect one of those two to be top four come the end of the season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. And the return to, or seeming return to fitness of Samuel and Titi, I think is going to have a pretty big bearing on that as well. I get some stick on the pub because I am an Alexandre Lacazette fanboy. I just and not since last season. That this goes back all the way back when he had terrible hair. I've just really liked him for a long time, and just sort of thought I've kind of mirrored him to how Thierry Henry was in his youth, but then he's changed his game a lot now, and I think the comparisons are not accurate. But without Fekir, like you say, he's just looked lost this year, and I've had to defend him several times and failed, sadly.
It would have been a tough task, I think, defending him this season, because it's. I think you look at the derby against Saint-Etienne where he got the hat trick, and that probably aside, we've not seen anything that even resembles the form of last season.
No, no. I wonder if Leon might be regretting not cashing in. We shall see. With regards to the sort of the French top division, can you give us some insight on, or just pick out maybe a couple of talents that some people may not have heard of? They can be young players, established players, anything you like, really.
Of
Just a couple
course.
of names.
So, well, I've mentioned the beauty of French football is that you look at nearly every side in that top flight, and they have in their ranks at least one, if not more, excellent player under the age of 25. Nearly every team seems to have a really good youth system um, that just works, that educates them, trains them properly, and they can come through and really flourish. So if you look at PSG, it's Rabiot. There's a young striker called Jean-Kevin Augustin. He looks a really good prospect, perhaps more established at PSG, obviously not trained by them, but you've got Verratti, who I do maintain is one of the top five midfielders in the world at the minute.
Well
At,
said.
at Lyon, you've got the likes of Fekir, you've got the likes of Umtiti. You look at Marseille, you've got Batshuayi, and they've got a really exciting young winger called George Kevin Nkudu, who's just sort of all over the place, but in a really good way. He's very unpredictable, but on his day, he's a really exciting player that you just don't know what's going to happen. Um, and then you look at Nice. I've got a lot of really good players coming through. Rennes, Toulouse, Reims. They've all got really good young players coming through. You look at Monaco. I think Monaco could probably field an entire 11 of really excellent young players. Um, but in terms of sort of players that really to keep an eye out on, I think you're probably looking at Fekir at Lyon. You're looking at George Kevin Nkudu at Marseille. Um, Mentioned him earlier on. Ousmane Dembele, young winger at Rennes, very very raw. So might be a couple of years before you really see the real deal from him. But there've been glimpses. He's only played a handful of games so far this season, but from what I've seen, he's been fantastic. You got Sofiane Boufal at Lille. He only moved to them from Angers in January. Um, he has looked, perhaps up until the last few weeks, but he at times has looked absolutely fantastic for Lille. Um, has now been linked with January moves to much bigger clubs, PSG being one. And then probably another one to look out for is a young forward at Monaco called Thomas Lemar. Really, really good, exciting young player, capable of achieving all sorts. Um, we've sort of kept an eye on him for quite a while. And then interestingly today, literally before we started here, I saw that he was linked with a move to Bayern, have been reported to watch him. So I think it wouldn't surprise me to see most, if not all, of those players just mentioned move on to bigger clubs in the next season or two. So that's probably just a small number of a much, much wider, broader range of players. But that's just some names I think to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, yeah, we do a thing on the podcast called the Hipsters Choice, which is where we sort of preview or cover a player and then just give people some insight on players they may not have heard of. And Sofiane Boufal was one of those that
Mm-hmm.
made that list. So two other names I'd just chuck into that list. I don't know if you'd agree, but Vincent Cosiello and Casimir Ninga. Who he excites me. I don't know what it is. It's almost like a Bambi on ice thing, but he just
Well, I
really
think
excites me.
I think with Ninga, it's a case of he's playing in uh, such a I don't know what the diplomatic way of saying. It's such a poor team.
Yeah,
Montpellier,
that's very
Montpellier,
true.
Montpellier are one of those teams that sometimes can be really tough to watch. But they've now, with having unearthed Ninga, they've really found somebody who can just inject that bit of excitement. And perhaps more importantly for them is actually scoring goals, because that's certainly been their problem. Probably you can stem it all the way back to when they had Giroud. They've never really fully replaced him since he joined Arsenal back in 2012, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
They've really really struggled. But he's come in, he's scored a handful of goals already. Um, it's that unpredictability, but an exciting unpredictability that it's the same with Nkudu at Marseille. You just never know quite what's going to happen. So, yeah, he's impressed me. And then Cosiello, who I maintain is only 12. When you look at him, He looks ridiculously young, but he's
He
one
really does.
he's one that's come into that Nice midfield, and for somebody who looks so small, so young, so frail, he's got real bite in midfield, and yeah, he's one that's just come from nowhere to be one of the real sort of standout youngsters this season.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We'll keep an eye, and again, we also do Team of the Week, and I always try to crowbar a few of the Ligue 1 players into that each week. So I shall keep doing that. Let's a couple of final questions. Give us some sort of names to look out for with regards to the French national side in the Euros. People will all be aware of the household names, but maybe just pick out one or two that may slide into the squad late and maybe make an impact in the summer.
Well, I think in terms of names to look out for, I mean, Deschamps is fairly set on his squad. I think he knows really who's going to be in that squad. Probably about 90% of the names already, I think, for the summer. There's probably only a very small number of players who perhaps stand a chance. I think the beauty of that French side, though, is it's got a really strong spine. So yes, they are household names, but you've got Lloris in goal, you've got Varane in defence, you've got Pogba, you've got probably by the looks of it, it's going to be Giroud up front with Benzema out of the picture for the moment at least. The one I think to look out for, he's actually been around for ages, but he's sort of almost a forgotten player, Lassana Diarra,
Yes.
who has not played football for what was it? I think it's 15 months. Joined Marseille in the summer and has come in, and I on our last French Football Weekly podcast, I actually mentioned him as probably one of the best players in the league so far this season. It's like he's never been away. He's probably playing some of the best football of his career. An absolute monster in midfield. He's everywhere, snapping at the heels of opposition players. Bringing the ball forward, distribution great, scoring spectacular goals. He was then brought back into the French squad almost immediately, and I genuinely think that come the summer he could be that sort of anchor defensive midfield position for France that certainly has been sort of fought amongst between Schneiderlin and Cabaye for sort of the last year or so. I think Diarra has come in and actually said, you know what, this is a position I play in, week out, unlike Schneiderlin and Cabaye. This is my position, and I think Deschamps will stick with him. So in terms of players to watch, I think he could be the one to really keep an eye on. That although people will know him, people have just forgotten about him.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but in terms of the European Championships themselves, I'm really expecting a lot from Pogba. Um, it's weird that I still don't think France fully know the best position for him in that midfield. It's like the system doesn't quite work, I don't think, to his best attributes. So I think if they can get the best out of him, that's going to in turn lead to a successful tournament for them. So I'm thinking that he should really be looking to make this tournament the tournament that he makes the statement of, you know what, I am one of the top 5 players in the world. Here's why. Um, I'm hoping that Varane will sort of establish himself as one of the best centre backs around. Um, in my view, not that he needs to establish that because I already believe that to be the case, but I think that there's a big chance there that he can really hammer that point home to perhaps the doubters, and then Griezmann as well is one that I think will almost benefit. I think with Benzema not playing, if indeed he does remain out of the picture. Because I think with Benzema out of the picture, it allows Griezmann to perhaps play a little bit more centrally, which certainly for France he seems to prefer, seems to flourish in. And certainly in the recent friendlies where he's had that opportunity, that's where we've seen the best of him for France. So I think those sort of 3 or 4 players will be the players I think that I would look to blossom in the tournament.
Yeah, our Spanish hipster Tom, he's got a real sort of soft spot for Griezmann, so that'll be I'm sure he'll love hearing that. I just very quickly, I just want to ask you something just that's come into my head again. All of our guys that do the pod, we are all gunners for our sins. What's the view in France as to what Francis Coquelin has to do to get in the French side? Obviously, he's injured at the moment, so it's kind of irrelevant. But he's been easily one of our top performers for 12 months now. Is he talked about in France, or is he kind of still under the radar?
I think he's almost under the radar still. I think that was certainly when it comes to Deschamps and him picking his side for his sort of central defensive midfielders. His go-to players certainly last year have been Cabaye and Schneiderlin. Cabaye certainly, I don't think that's his best position. Schneiderlin is perhaps a little more suited to it. He's now brought in Diarra. He's then got the likes of Kondogbia, who could arguably come in and play a similar position. And then there's a couple of sort of under 21 players who are knocking at the door. So I think Coquelin almost is a forgotten man out of all of this. I'll confess that I'm not the most avid of Premier League watchers, but from what I've seen, he has impressed me. But Deschamps at times can be a little bit stubborn with his squad choices. There has been the sort of popular belief that Samuel Umtiti should be in this French squad, but for whatever reason, and Deschamps gave an interview a few weeks ago where he was actually quite almost derogatory, really, about Umtiti as sort of like, well, if he plays to the level that I want him to play, I'll pick him, but at the minute he's not. But it's like, but he's one of the best centre backs currently playing for French centre backs currently playing. So Deschamps does, I think, suffer a little bit of stubbornness. But in terms of what Coquelin needs to do, well, all I can really say, I suppose, is just carry on playing that form and just it's keep the fitness levels up, I suppose, because ultimately, if he's getting niggling little injuries here and there, it's not going to help his case. But I think it's going to be tough, if I'm honest, for him to get in because there's a lot of players, I think, ahead of him in the picture.
Yeah, not due back until sort of March time as well. It's going to be touch and go to get that fitness up. But Arsenal players injured, who'd have thought?
Well, exactly.
Final question: we asked this to all of our interviewees. It's a bit of a random one, but I want to know from you who's your sort of favourite hipster player. You can have one past and present. If you can make the French even better, but it's free reign, you can go for gold.
Well, I mean, I've had a thought about this, and certainly as regards a past player, I can't narrow it down to any less than two. One French, one not. So I've got Lilian Thuram, who, my mind, one of the best defenders the world's seen, unbelievable player, both for France, but also you look at the clubs he's played for, Parma, Juventus, Barcelona. He's still the most capped French player. And for me, he was the player that gave me my single best, I'd say it's the best single memory I have of football, which is that semi-final.
Croatia,
v Croatia in France 98 was just one of those moments that will just stay with me. Both of the goals he scored, an absolute footballing hero, as far as I'm concerned. The man can literally do no wrong. He's now sort of, since he retired from the game, gone on and done humanitarian work, and he's just won't have a bad word said against him. I wrote a bit for French Football Weekly. In fact, it was one of my earlier bits about him as my footballing hero, and it's just fantastic. I really don't think we will see a better defender in my lifetime. I don't think I will. I think he's just set that pinnacle and that bar for what a modern day defender is to such a height that it's difficult to see that being beaten while I'm still around. The other player then, one that Arsenal fans may have fond memories of, or perhaps not, Kim Källström.
Oh yes, yeah.
So
I do.
So I admit he was a Championship manager love back in 2001.
We've all got them, Rich.
We've all got them. But what also was for me was he joined Rennes right at the start of when my interest sort of began with the club. And so he sort of joined as my sort of love for Rennes started to sort of grow at a rapid rate. He was a fantastic player for Rennes. Really good left foot, scored goals from all over the place. He then moved on to Lyon. He was part of that great Lyon side, sort of the mid to late 2000s. It's just disappointing his career perhaps has panned out the way it has. He moved to Russia, and that's never really worked out. He had a fairly disastrous spell on loan at Arsenal, but I have incredibly fond memories of him from his time in France. So they're my sort of past players. In terms of current, I will keep it again Rennes based. Again, I have two. I've got Benoit Costil, goalkeeper, fantastic goalkeeper. A Giroud, not a Giroud lookalike. Well, he was a Giroud lookalike until Costil cut his hair recently. Fantastic goalkeeper. I'm totally biased / unbiased when I say he's probably the best goalkeeper in France at the minute. Consistently as well over the last 3 or 4 seasons, been brilliant. But I would probably go for Paul-Georges Ntep. Currently injured, actually, so he'd probably suit Arsenal quite well.
I was going to say.
But he's another one of those that's just frustrating and exciting to watch in equal measure. When he's on, when he's on his game, there's very few better players to watch in Ligue 1. He's lightning quick. He's got all sorts of skills in his repertoire. He scores spectacular goals. He scored that infamous goal that people may have seen where it was against Ram, where he rounded the goalkeeper, ran in on goal, then got down on all fours and headed the ball over the line. That got loads of people very, very angry about his attitude and Mickey taking and all this, that, and the other. And then he came out and just said, "Well, football's all about enjoying yourself." And I just thought, you know what, that's actually quite a decent attitude to have in this modern day and age of footballers doing all sorts, just to come out and say, well, you know what, I'm just having fun. I love that, and he is a really, really, really good player. He's only going to get better. Sadly, he's not going to be at Rennes for much longer. He will move to a better club, and he is also an outside bet. I think if he can come back from his current injury, which he's due to sort of middle of January time, I believe, he has sort of got an outside chance of making that French squad for the Euro 2016 tournament.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes peeled. I'm much like you. I'm quite a fan, and since I've been listening to the pod, I've started to really sort of follow your guys' teams as well and just pick players out. And he's one that's I think he was linked with Arsenal and Liverpool a while ago, like a couple of years back when he sort of first came to prominence. And certainly fits the bill as far as that type of player goes. But super, that's brilliant. You've conjured up some wonderful memories of that especially that semi-final. I was actually in France on a school study visit. I seem to recall, and I for the life of me I can't remember what we were in the smallest French village, and it was just there was bunting everywhere, and it was just the most amazing feeling to be in a country where a World Cup was. So,
of course, yes.
Yeah, some really good memories there. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much, Rich. I want to give you an opportunity now just to plug anything that FFW are doing, your Twitter handle where people can find you, and anything else you want to give a shout to, really.
Of course. Well, website's FrenchFootballWeekly.com. Twitter handle is @FrenchFTWeekly. My own personal one is @Rich_Allen85. One thing I will just say about French Football Weekly to keep an eye out on in the sort of coming weeks, it's actually probably more towards March, April time, we'll have Le 50 come out, which is our annual publication for the best 50 young players in France. We're currently in the midst of, we've actually narrowed that down to our 50 now. We're now just going through the motion of researching and profiling the players involved. So that will be out, and that's always worth a read when that comes out. So be sure to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, I'm excited by that. It usually gives me about 4 days worth of readings. Plenty to keep an eye on. Fantastic, good stuff. Well, I'd say really appreciate you coming on, Rich. It's been really, really interesting. We've covered far more ground than I could ever imagine we would. So it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure if something interesting comes up in the Euros in the summer, we'll grab you and pull you back on if that's all right. So really appreciate your time.
No problem at all.
Super job. Well, thank you very much for our listeners for tuning in. As always, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy, and we will speak to you on a pod soon.